Every dealership strives for excellence, but sometimes things go wrong. When consumers complain about your practices, the consequences can be devastating. If you're lucky, they'll just leave a negative review online. Your reputation may take a hit, but it's manageable. However, if they call the state attorney general's office, the impact can be much worse. What if you had a tool to manage that feedback internally with the ability to address it swiftly and effectively? Introducing DealerResolve, the ultimate feedback management solution. Keep your reputation safe, your customers happy, and your community trust intact. Customer retention is your most valuable tool for real ROI. Visit DealerResolve.com and protect what matters most. DealerResolve. Protect, respond, retain.
Hey y'all, we are back for another ASOTU Edge webinar. Today we're going to be talking a little more about compliance. So the title for today's webinar is Don't Miss the Signals, How Unresolved Complaints Can Turn into Compliance Nightmares. So we're going to be joined today by our friends at DealerResolve and AFIP, which is the Association of Finance and Insurance Professionals. So going to turn it over in a minute to our hosts, Paul J. Daly and Kyle Mountsier. And then we're going to bring in Shannon Robertson. He is the co-founder of DealerResolve, as well as the executive director of AFIP, as well as Steve Fucile, who is the national director of sales for DealerResolve. Enjoy, everyone. We'll see you in a bit.
Thanks, AMJ. Kyle.
Oh man.
Look, listen.
Let me tell you, there's four things that I love about ASOTU Edge webinars. You ready for it?
Four things. Okay. Yeah, I'm ready.
Four things that I enjoy.
Ready.
First thing that I enjoy, it's only 30 minutes, because
or less.
Most people don't have time for hour-long webinars. Second thing I love, whenever everybody that is not from south of the Tennessee border gets on and hears Anne-Marie go, hey, y'all.
Hey, y'all.
And I just love it. I just get all excited about that, right? The third thing that I love is that we're always talking about topics that, like sometimes just don't get talked about in our industry, right? We're trying to find things like last webinar was titles. This webinar is compliance. Like this, everybody wants to talk about leads. We're going to talk about the real stuff. The last thing I love is you never know who you're going to get. And I'm telling you, you didn't know you were getting these folks today. You better watch out.
You're going to know. And to your, I mean, you had a lot of points there. To your third point.
That's my third point. Thank you.
When talking about leads and talking about tech is always fun, but everyone in this room, like that's going to see this or see it later, has had some level of customer complaint that escalated quickly. Absolutely. Right? And they didn't see it coming. And most, if not everyone, had one that got to a regulatory level, right? Where there was an attorney general, right? And you think about what it takes to like handle a heat case in the service department. Once you get a letter in the mail or an email, right? Everything you thought you were doing right then is not happening. And instead
you actually pray for the person that's mad on the showroom, like, cause you know about that one. It's the one that, right? You're like, oh, I can grab the hose and pull out and go fight this fire, right? Yes. It's the ones that you don't know about that escalate or go wild. And so I love that there are people in our industry thinking about that, thinking about how to protect on the very front end of that situation all the way through to the end, because it's, again, like we said, a lot of our industry is focused on like, how do we acquire more customers for service and sales and parts, right? And the reality is that once we acquire those, what are we doing with them? Both for, caring for their needs, caring for their complaints, caring for the lifetime of their ownership with us. And all of that care, I think, is what can separate a dealer in this industry.
Without a doubt. Let's bring our guests on today, Shannon Robertson and Stephen Fucile. What's up, gentlemen?
Good morning.
Oh, goodness.
What a radio voice.
Where did that come from?
I was going to throw Good Morning Vietnam in there, but I'm not Robin Williams. So
I mean, Shannon's like, did I really sign up for this right now is what he's
I love
thinking.
Steve. I've known Steve for a while, but we are polar opposites in human beings in a lot of ways.
I like the immediate disassociation. You can tell there's a compliance
put
expert
him on that side of the screen. I'll stay over here. Don't worry about it. Right.
I haven't actually. This is fun because I haven't seen this video layout yet, so I feel like I can look this way and look this way. and then look down and see Kyle. This is great. Oh, well, thank you for being here.
You're not even breaking any rules. You can do that. And you're not even breaking rules.
Wow.
Yeah, I feel
already on the topic. Today. Look at this.
I know. Well, let's talk a little bit. Let's get to know each other for a second. Shannon, why don't you go first, and then we'll finish up with the man with the magic voice over there.
There we go. Shannon Robertson, Executive Director of AFIP. We run a couple compliance companies in the auto industry. Background for me is, I spent a lot of time in the securities and exchange world working for a large financial company. Became a compliance officer through them. I got real tired of mutual fund and those type of presentations. Decided to come over to the auto side.
Yeah.
Spent some time on the auto side. Enjoyed the sales and finance world. Transitioned into AFIP about 10 years ago. And I've been running AFIP for probably the last 6 or 7 years. For AFIP, we do federal state regulatory training. We do, about 250, 300 certifications a month. We have 4 trainers that are always in dealerships, just hearing of what's going on at the stores.
And just to answer this one question, is automotive more fun than you thought it would be?
Well, I knew it'd be fun.
I know it's even more fun than you thought it would be.
Absolutely. I just every visit's it is exciting. You never know what you're going to get into, and you never know what stories you're going to hear.
Very good, Mr. Fucile.
Or what stories you're going to end up telling. That's the real problem.
That's why we all do it, I think.
Shannon's modest, so he grew up around this stuff. So his family's got a long lineage of good car people. So I'll just let that hang.
All right, it's your turn.
All right, Steve Fucile, 30-year car guy, spent 15 years in Houston, Texas. Most of those at Monday Chevrolet, which is a 1,200 car month monster.
Whoa.
That we grew out of really a 240 car month store. Guys like Nate Murphy that are the general manager and managing partner over at Fred Haas Toyota World. So I was just raised around savages that knew how to do it right. And that's just the God's honest truth of it. I mean, we knew how to do paperwork. We knew how to treat customers. We knew how to do the things right. And as a result of that, I've been blessed with a really, truly beautiful career. I was E-Lead national training manager for a few years there, and then moved over into the independent space for a long time, ran stores, owned a little piece of one. And then Shannon and I met a few years ago doing my podcast, actually, and spent about 3.5 hours in here. I think I almost got him divorced. And then we oh
boy.
About 6 months
Speaking
later,
of compliance.
That's what the money's at. So about a year later, we found a way to come to work together, and it's been a blessing. So
tell us this, because like compliance is a broad term, right? Understanding not just compliance, but also like how that, because when people think about compliance, they think about what paperwork am I doing correct? But there's also the side of compliance that is, how am I caring for customers on the front end of compliance, right? To make sure that we never get to a situation where more people are potentially finding out about some uncompliant thing that I'm doing, and I'm approaching this on the front end. But why right now? Why is it important for dealers to be focused on these things about like compliance and complaints? Is what market indicators are telling us this is like a focus area for us?
Shannon,
I'll ask Shannon.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I could probably spend a couple hours on the answer. I'll try to keep it short. My God-given talents to over-explain. So here I go.
Perfect for regulatory. I mean, it's
perfect.
Hand in glove, right?
There's a couple things there. I mean, compliance is no longer something that's just become a checklist for what we need to do in life. It's part of our daily life. It's an accountability tool. Compliance isn't any longer did I protect the customer's non-public information. It's now about my policies and procedures of my day-to-day dealership life. And a couple of things that drove the spotlight on compliance is one, kind of the FTC focus on where we see them looking at audits and where we see the FTC fining dealers is putting a spotlight on compliance. Mm-hmm. And two, there's an interesting fact that over 50% of all audits at a dealership performed by a federal or state agency are driven by consumer complaints.
You said 50%?
Wow. Okay, that just blew my mind.
Over 50%.
Over 50%.
So you're saying if there's an audit, there's a high likelihood that started with a very simple, perhaps consumer complaint.
100%.
Woo! So
Wow.
raise your hand
That
if you
just
like
blew my
audits. Right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
everyone's paying attention.
I mean, that's the telling number that most of us don't. And in talking with dealers, and if you ask them what happens if somebody complains, well, they call the 1-800 number and they get routed back to the customer back to the employee
that they had a complaint.
Right. So let's let the guy who started the complaint handle the complaint. Probably the least effective method.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So, and we talk about FTC enforcement. I mean, dealers can be proactive, look at trends, put policies, procedures in place based on audit trends on how to protect themselves. And then they also need to be reactive because nobody's perfect. So I'm going to do my best to protect. And then if I don't, I need to have something in place to help me react.
Gotcha. So, Stephen, were you going to say something right there?
No, I just 100% agree with him. Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah, feel free to jump in. This is like, it's just
a good time.
It's just a thing. What are some of the things that are prime in the FTC's focus right now?
So we've seen an increase. Yeah, we've seen quite a few increase in FTC enforcement action over the last couple of years. We've seen two big dealers hit in the last 45, 60 days. I don't want to give out dealer names, but this is all public information on the FTC's website. But the two biggest areas we see where dealers are being fined has to do with lack of transparency, either in the F&I process, the sales online process, advertised price, add-on products, and then through what's known as disparity. Right? The government is doing audits at stores and determining are protective and non-protective classes being treated similarly. Right? And two of the dealer groups that have just been, announced enforcement actions, one of the things stated is Latinos and African-American customers paid more on markup over buy rate and more on aftermarket products than non-Latinos and African-Americans when all the other variables were similar.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two areas of focus. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. One of the other things that drives all that is just the transparency of it, right? So are you clearly communicating to your customer in your finance office, on your pencils, what's happening, what products are available, what they're being charged for, and are those products valuable, right? You can't sell customer smoke. That's the thing. So if you're charging extra cash for smoke and you're doing that disparagingly over time, that brings up these UDAP situations. You're talking about disparaging people. And then when that gets into those protected classes, like you say, the government takes let's say a very high interest in the inner workings of your dealership. We'll just say it that way.
So what would you say that those are the most frequent things dealers are being fined for right now?
Per what we're seeing from an FTC, that's what the documentation shows. Right. If we go back and look through the FTC website, what are the enforcement actions from a sales and F&I standpoint? I would say those are the most common areas.
All right. So as we're establishing the stakes for the solutions we're about to talk about, what do fines look like?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean,
I laugh because it's more money than the four of us will make. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
2.6 million, 3.4 million, 4.7 million, 10.1 million.
So that other store you were looking at acquiring, we're going to give it to the government instead.
If you look at it, there's one in Wisconsin that actually was ordered to close their business. Cease doing business.
They're like, this is so bad, you have to stop.
It was 3 franchise and one used car dealer, and the owners were named in that actual enforcement action and ordered to cease doing business. So it can be that dramatic. Steve mentioned UDAP.
What's $10 million amongst friends? Yeah, I mean, come on, what's $10 million amongst friends? We can pull that together, right?
Come on now.
Steve, you mentioned UDAP. Does everybody know what UDAP is, or do we just
no? Spell it out. Spell it out.
So there are two ways. There you go. There are two ways the FTC can have an enforcement action. If you violate a written rule, your fine for 2024 can be up to $51,744 per violation. And then they have the secondary area where they can enforce fines under an umbrella known as UDAP, unfair and deceptive acts or practices, which is a pretty subjective,
very umbrella. Broad. Yes,
very broad. Yeah.
We always teach that UDAP governs the gray. So a lot of the enforcement action that we've seen in the last 5, 6, 7 years has been under that UDAP umbrella, payment packing, those type of things, junk fees, all of that falls under the UDAP umbrella. And not the joke, but not to sound like a middle-aged Eminem, but there is no cap on a UDAP fine, right? So that's what makes UDAP so scary, is they can fine you whatever they can justify in court.
So the joke is that almost everything's a UDAP fine, and a UDAP fine can literally be whatever they decide it to be.
Wow.
And there's basically no recourse to you for that.
So here's what I'm hearing, because like when I hear this, good chance that some of these dealers that are engaging in this type of practice are just not good dealers, right? Like there's a good chance, but there's also probably what I would consider like a subset that, like, if we all looked around the room and maybe like knew the owners, knew some of the leadership, maybe knew the dealer group, we would go, oh no, that's a good dealer group over there. Oh, they've got some stuff put together. They know what they're doing. They're a good owner. They say great things on LinkedIn. But these sneaky little things kind of get in the inner workings of the leadership or the management, or processes aren't tight. Is that where you're seeing actually the larger the larger impetus for some of this, where it's like the sneaky thing that the customer complaint escalated just like opened the door wide open for all the other stuff?
Hey, Shannon, let me just say one thing about one of the dealer groups that's being sued, that's involved in one of these two dealer groups in Texas. I worked for this group many years ago. And every person that I knew that worked inside that store was professional, serious, non-compromised, caring, car-driven, people-driven, good, hardworking folks in the car business. And that dealer group is involved in that. And some of those people are still there. So I don't think that it sways or goes back and forth. It's really just about a perception to the customer, and then how transparent and clear you're being about your processes.
Right.
Well,
so
government perception's reality, right? So if you get audited and the government says our perception is you're treating Latinos and African Americans differently, if I don't have a policy that consistently speaks to how I treat and handle people consistently, I don't have a way to defend it. So like one of the dealer groups, I honestly don't think they were saying you're Latino and African American, we're going to charge you $200 more. I honestly don't think that was something that they were teaching in the process.
Right.
But because they did not have a policy that markup over buy rate and pricing on products were consistently applied with a limit, like everybody, it's 2 points over buy rate, whatever. But because they didn't have policies in place and they don't document deviation, I can't combat government perception with reality because I didn't create reality. And I feel bad for some of these dealers because they're simply paying a fine because it's too expensive to try to fight it, right? Or too expensive to try to prove it because I just didn't have a policy proactively set up. And you know, the Texas group has been very clear. They disagree with the FTC. They pretty much said, let's go to court. Let's do this. Because they believe that fine wasn't that.
Let's ask this then, because you're starting to key in on like, okay, so how do we solve the problem at the local dealer level, right? I'm hearing you say create defined policies. Maybe explore that a little bit, and then maybe ping pong back and forth. Like, what are the 2 or 3 other things that people should be inspecting, diving into, whether or not they have these processes or things in place to mitigate the risk on the other side?
Excellent question. Good point. I can jump on this. So there are, I do this all day long. There is two I love this shit. I love this stuff. There are 2, I just cussed, I apologize. There are 2 NADA policies that are strongly suggested that if the dealer implements, provides them protection if audited. And the first one's the Fair Credit Compliance Policy, which walks dealers through to how to handle markup over buy rate with a standard markup that everybody gets treated the same. And if you downward deviate, you only do that for one of 7 approved reasons. They have another policy called the Voluntary Protection Product Policy, which puts a price limit on the products you sell. Everything has a cap. You never go above it. So if audited, I can show the government everybody starts the same way no matter what. And then the third one is they need to have a consistent desking process. Everybody's got to be desked the same way. You can't have 4 desking managers desking 4 different ways.
Right.
And then the last
that
one
never happens.
No, that never. The questions I love to ask dealers when I get on site. What's your desking process?
Well, you
which
got to
one do
ask the
talk
salespeople,
to?
like,
Yeah.
which manager gives you the best this? Which manager?
There you go.
Yeah.
That's who to go to right
Who
there.
do you play the most golf with? Right.
Right.
Why did the finance manager make sure his best friend became the desking manager? I know why.
We all got to make a living, Shannon. We all
There
gotta make
you
a
go.
living.
And the other thing is just training. I mean, some of it, if you look at one of the dealer groups, one of the things they were fined for was telling customers that the addendums were required. They had to buy them no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And they were making some exceptions, right? And some of that just comes to training, right? Right. I want my new sales guy to be a strong sales guy. You go tell the customer they have to buy it no matter what. Right. That's a great, easy statement to make. That we want to have a strong salesperson, but maybe that additional training on what the rules are surrounding those addendums, right? When do we need to push it? When do we don't? I mean, a lot of the complaints that we looked at some of these stores came from them calling the store saying, I said I didn't want these products. They were addendums. You forced me to buy them. I now found out I don't have to have them. Right. And you won't change it. So now I'm going to file a complaint.
Oh my gosh, it really happens that directly?
Yeah,
100%. What you could do is if you take the word like predatory and exchange that with like leniency, right, or inconsistency, those two are almost synonymous, right?
Right. So if you were to say like, great, because predatory
right there
sounds so bad, but if you're like inconsistent lending policies, everyone goes, ooh,
right.
Yeah. Are we doing that? Right.
Because that can be filtered out to predatory really, really quickly by an auditor, right?
Yep. Absolutely. 100%. Because they're not looking at who the salesman is and what his relationship to that manager is. And how long, Kyle, you've worked with me for 15 years. If you come up to the desk and tell me, hey, this guy's 6.99 at his credit union, we got this, we got that. If you're $400 over invoice, just give me a pencil. You send him out a pencil. Well, that's not the way you open up every car deal, right? That is not a consistent policy. That's not the regulatory way to do it. It's not the way to protect yourself and your dealer. And that's how you open yourself up to inconsistencies and fines. So just synonymous words, predatory and inconsistency.
That's
okay.
A big
So let's move to, because we've set up like consistency in process, consistency in policy, validating that you have not just written but verbalized and moved through the entire team. But when the thing sneaks through and when the customer complaint comes up, what's that part of the process look like from your perspective, Shannon? When because we know they're going to happen, right? Things are going to squeak through. The new employee is going to say something weird, whatever it is, right? Or the 20-year employee is going to say something weird. Probably actually more likely, right?
Yeah, more likely the 20-year employee.
Crusty, the car dog over here is going to give you his piece of advice.
So give it that. And what's how do we fill the gap when these things come up?
So you have to have a written complaint policy or process. Everybody's got to be trained. You need to have people at your store that are designated and trained to be the point of contact for complaints, right? One of the groups that was audited and fined about 5 years ago, they asked the general managers, right? How did you not know these were trends at your store? There's been an increase in complaints by 103%. You should have known these things. But the phone tree, you called the front desk, they routed you back to the people that did the complaint. So you need to have a process that complaints go to one person. Now that person can divvy it out for resolution, but everything needs to start at a single point so that all complaints can be tracked at. And whether you create a 1-800 number compliance line, whether you have a compliance email address, right on the back of the buyer's guide, there's a button that says for complaints after sale contact, right? You even have a place to put that information there. So you need to have a single point of contact where the complaint starts. Everybody has to be trained. That's where those complaints go. That way I can track it, I can trace it, and I can make sure there's resolution.
Yep.
So I'm gonna add a statement. I said earlier that over 50% of audits are driven by consumer complaints.
Yep.
I reword that into my own statement as I think it's unresolved complaints lead to government audit.
Right.
Because I call the store, I'm unhappy. When you
That's
don't
work
with me,
right
there you go.
Yeah.
If you resolve it, it's resolved.
It is, because how many customers know they can go to a government website and file a complaint? Maybe 1%.
And if so, right. Yeah, that number's got to be very small because, like, what else do you ever go to you go to Amazon to complain, you call customer service, you go to Better Business Bureau. Very few people are even wired. Like, you have to feel really screwed over to go to and get into that whole thing.
I mean,
that's what drives that there.
You think you got to be really screwed over. It can also be something as simple. And I make these little simple ideas and, these far-fetched ideas, but the reality of it is that if somebody's family works for that AG's office and you upset somebody in the PTA and you got two ladies that, run into each other at soccer practice or at dance class or volleyball, and they go, you bought a car from, Joe Blow Chevrolet in Bogota, Wisconsin. Hey man, I had a bad experience. I had a bad experience. You know what? Let's call my brother.
And that's where it happens.
So two unresolved problems could start something that's, it's the first domino. That's the one you want to stop.
I mean, and this isn't new. If I remember the story right, the Maroney label came from Senator Maroney, who had a friend, relative, or daughter who got screwed in a used car purchase.
That's right.
We have a Maroney label, right? I mean, even I was talking to the California group last year, and 2 of the California law changes simply happened because somebody who was screwed over was somebody related to somebody in the decision-making process in the state of California. It's, and I hate to make it that simple, but it is that simple.
It can be.
And if you look at the cars rule, like the FTC's got this new rule that might come out, and there's going to be arguments. But if you look at why they said there needs to be rules, everything pointed to consumer complaints.
Wow.
Yep.
There's we were just Jordan Cox on our team just went out and covered Public Policy Day in DC last week, and he came back with what was the most surprising thing, because he had never even been to DC, and then he's there. He said the most surprising thing that he saw was they were talking to a staffer of a congressman, and the staffer was the one who was advising on auto industry related things. And they were like, well, tell us about when the last time you bought a car. The staffer was like, I've never bought a car. I don't need one. I live in the city. Right. But if that staffer has a family member or friend that has an issue with a process, there's nothing there for him to just be like, and this is going on over here. Right. And then all of a sudden it's elevated.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't take that much.
It doesn't. So we're getting to the last couple of minutes here. I would love, if we have any Q&A from the audience, you feel free to chime in, and Nathan will feed us questions if they're out there. This is why DealerResolve has a complaint management system, right? Because you talked a lot, Shannon, about you have to have a process. And if you can show a process, that is like a massive wall of defense against, because a regulator is going to come in and that's what they're going to ask. Here's the accusation. Let me see the process. And the second you don't have anything to show them, right, the DEFCON level goes up.
That's what the problem is. Yeah.
Well, and there is no perfect dealer. The last thing I want an auditor to say is, show me more deal jackets. So if I reach out, let's be honest, right? So if I reach out and I'm like, hey, we have a complaint from somebody, and you're like, oh, I know that person. Let me send you, in our complaint tool, everything is timestamped, every communication, every action.
Yeah.
Right. So you can download that complaint to an Excel spreadsheet, send it to the state auditor and say, I know of this. Here's everything we did to try to resolve that complaint.
Yeah.
And if I can do that, the odds of them saying, show me more is probably is a lot less. But the minute I'm like, I don't know who this person is, or we have 3 complaints, you have no data on any of these people, you have no idea what's going on. There you go.
I'm going to figure out what's going on.
That's right.
That's where that process starts. There, like I say it all the time, there is no perfect dealer. I need to make sure that I have the information the auditors are looking for, and that I can check the list, that I'm doing my due diligence, so they don't ask for more deals.
I agree that 1,000%.
Right. I know that feeling, even just from an accountant auditing. I'm like, they wouldn't ask for more deals. The controller's like, oh boy,
I would ask if you're a dealer and you're out there and you're really wondering, like, hey, I don't want to, this sounds like a bunch of stuff that's going to cut my gross profit down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, forget about what it'll save you in the long run over real terms. But the reality of it is half the time when you have a really fully trained sales staff, and you guys know this better than anybody, when you have a fully trained, fully operational, transparent, professional car dealership, you make more money. right? It's just the way it goes. You have better people, better processes. We all make more profit. And so I think everybody operates, we sell cars for fun and profit, right? But I think everybody operates from a position of like safety third, right? It's like everything's more important than safety, well, I mean, this is important stuff that's going to save your business, save everybody's business a bunch of time, energy, and money. So
we didn't even get to social media. I mean, our tool has a whole social media aspect.
Yeah.
Right. Social media is an important part of that. And that we addressed all of that in the tool, but you just can't ignore those statements and those comments.
Well,
right.
Gentlemen, I think
So
we did a
smart.
really, really good job with this topic today. I'm not that I'm going to toot our own horn, but I am. And Steven's got the heart glasses on, which means it's time to
Full
go,
send.
everybody. No, Shannon, Steve, thank you so much for just sharing the passion on this topic, because we talked about it ahead of the show. It's not a topic that everyone says, "Oh, let me get involved." But I think you did a great job of painting out very clearly what the risks and how small of a thing can turn into a gigantic thing. So thank you for being here. Thanks for serving the industry this way, and looking forward to the next time already.
Thank
you guys. Appreciate it.
All right, we're going to flip it back to Anne-Marie.
All right, y'all. That was a great webinar. And if you have any other questions or you want to get into touch with Shannon, go ahead and reach out to him. His email address is shannon.robertson@afip.com. First name last @afip.com. Thanks for joining us on another ASOTU Edge webinar. Y'all have a great rest of the week. Bye.